Mississippi Farm Bureau. Luke Johnson covers the New Orleans Saints, and he is kind enough to spend a few minutes with us this afternoon. Even though the news, Luke, is that Deshaun Watson, he is now Cleveland bound. Does this weekend become a little easier for you and the other folks that cover the Saints on not just a daily but a minute-by-minute basis?
Well, shoot, I mean, at least my my day isn't being held hostage anymore. So, yeah, obviously this is something that we were all just kind of waiting on for several days now. And the longer the process drew out, I was just certain that it was going to keep going on in perpetuity. It was going to be covering this stuff in April. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's the path forward gets a little bit clearer now, but there's still a lot of questions. I think as we've seen kind of around the league with these teams that have been pursuing Deshaun Watson, some of them have kind of alienated their own quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly how this entire situation playing out impacted Jameis Winston's desire to sign here in New Orleans. Yeah, I'm assuming that he's still in the mix for him, and that they can, ramp up these conversations again and see where that leads. But you just never know how these sorts of things impact a person's mentality when it comes to deciding where they want to play. So that's going to be something that kind of bears watching over these next couple of days.
So let's get to the Saints piece of it in a second. But I'm curious your reaction to the Deshaun Watson story after covering it as heavily as you have for the last, I don't know, certainly a few days, maybe a couple of weeks, and feeling like it was really a possibility. What did you think when you saw the numbers and you saw that ultimately Cleveland was the team that was able to get it done?
Well, I think the number, the main number that sticks out is the contract, right? Yeah, I think everybody kind of ruled out Cleveland yesterday, or maybe even the day before. I don't know. Time just stood still for a couple of days here. So I think everybody thought they were kind of out of the race, and then you really saw why they were in it. They gave him a huge contract. And, I don't think the Saints were probably willing to go that high, especially with some of the guarantees. And, it's probably the same situation with Atlanta, even though they're going to have a bunch of cap space next year. It's a lot of your resources tied up into one player. The compensation part doesn't surprise me. In fact, I thought it was probably a little bit lighter than what I was anticipating. The 3 first-rounders, kind of everybody anticipated that was coming. With the other draft capital, I'm surprised there wasn't any players involved in that deal. But I think this can be something that works out in New Orleans' favor in the long run. But they got to get those picks right. Otherwise, giving up, if they would have given up their last 3 first-round picks, which were Marcus Davenport and Cesar Ruiz and Peyton Turner, I think it would have been okay with that. For Deshaun Watson. So the compensation really, I think teams can live with that easily once you got the most important question answered long term with a guy who's in his mid-20s. So I think the money thing was the thing that really stuck out to me, and that's probably what made Cleveland the winner in this, because that's something that was their big pitch to him, right? Is you're going to come here and you're going to be taken care of financially for life.
And Luke, the thing that I'm not entirely certain about, and maybe you are from having covered every angle of this, whether it was Cleveland where he ended up, or New Orleans, or Atlanta, or Carolina, or anywhere else, what's the level of certainty that he's going to be available? I mean, we know that there are no criminal charges, but the league still hasn't ruled in terms of conduct policy. How significant a suspension from the league could we see?
Well, I think if you're looking at precedent, probably the most recent example was Ben Roethlisberger, and he ended up serving 4 games. It could be worse than that. It could be more substantial. He could be out for half a season for all we know. But I think when you're looking at making this kind of trade, and I want to be clear here, the accusations against him are no joke. I mean, it's 22 people,
right,
who said he acted inappropriately in a sexual manner toward him. I think that's clear. It's a clear indication that the NFL is just going to consider talent and talent alone. If you are as talented as Deshaun Watson. There's a lot of stuff that people are going to be willing to gloss over. If he was, a mid-tier, lower-tier quarterback, there's no chance he'd be getting all this attention, right? He'd have to work a lot harder for that second opportunity. So, for that reason, I'm kind of glad I'm not having to cover this. And then, I think there's a good chance that he misses a significant portion of the season. But when you're doing this sort of deal, I mean, you're doing it with the future in mind.
Sure, it's not just about
Cleveland's
single season
championship window. I mean, he's going to be 27 years old next year when he's playing a full season. I think they know they have like a 6 or 7 year window with him there where he's going to be in his prime. And with a good roster around him, that immediately boosts their Super Bowl chances pretty substantially.
All right, so let's bring it back to New Orleans. And quarterback obviously is the first question, but there are other questions as well in terms of the Armstead sweepstakes and kind of what's going on there. But let's start with quarterback. I mean, does priority number one become signing Jameis Winston, or do you think there's a different plan at that position?
Well, I think if you would have asked me 5 days ago, I would have said Jameis is a pretty clear top priority. But they showed that they're interested in acquiring the best possible player there. And I don't know exactly what the organization thinks of some of the other possible available quarterbacks and what those quarterbacks might command in a trade. Yeah, I don't know if they were thinking Baker Mayfield was going to be available. Maybe they like him. So I think the easy answer is to say Jameis. They're obviously comfortable with him. They're familiar with him. They've said publicly that they would like that to be an option for him. But I think the options have changed and the landscape has changed so drastically in the last week that I think there's any number of ways they could go. So Jameis is the odds-on favorite, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him kick the tires in some of the other names out there.
What's the future for Alvin Kamara?
Oh, I think he's going to. This is not based on any reporting or anything like that, but I would assume, he's not going to serve any jail time. I would imagine those sorts of cases typically find a way to resolve themselves. I would imagine he's going to face some suspension or some discipline from the league this year. And there's not a ton of precedent for that type of situation, so it's really kind of up in the air as far as what that might be. But he still very much factors into this organization's like long-term plans. I think he's only 25 years old. He's clearly, when he's on the field, one of the best players in the NFL. Very important to what they do offensively. So there's a little concern this year about what you're going to have to do in the likely event that he's suspended for a little while. I think they're probably going to add to their running back room this offseason to make sure they're not just completely at a loss whenever that does happen. But he's absolutely a part of the organization's long-term plans, and I feel very confident in saying that.
So, Luke, let's wrap it up here. We got about a minute left. If you had to get your dry erase board out on the wall in your office and you had to go number 1, number 2, number 3, and you were listing of priorities of importance for the Saints, I guess we're talking personnel. What's 1, 2, and 3?
I would say quarterback 1, easily by far.
Sure.
Number 2, I'd probably go receiver. I think they can make things work on the offensive line right now. I think receiver is a more pressing need for them. But then, after that, I'd say offensive tackle, and really that kind of changes obviously depending on what happens with Teron Armstead.
Sure.
I was convinced that he was going to leave. They have now cleared up gobs and gobs of cap space. Maybe they bring him back and find a cheaper alternative at quarterback. I'm not sure. But I think if I were handicapping it right now, that would be my 1, 2, 3. It'd be quarterback, receiver, offensive line, specifically offensive tackle.
Sounds good. We will keep a checklist there and see how long it takes the Saints to mark those things off of the to-do list. Luke, really appreciate your time and your insight this afternoon. Have a great weekend.